So when you grab the report, there's so many great stories in there. But let's head over to Dani and Sarah, who were, as Kai and Laurie have said, the #1 team out of the 100,000 that we analysed for this report. So Sarah is from Chaucer. Sarah's the head of knowledge management, and Dani is the head of corporate communications and engagement. So Dani and Sarah, firstly, can you tell us about, I think you're both on mute at the moment, but can you tell us about your top team, your #1 team, please?
Yes, hi everybody. As you said it, Kai, earlier, it was a bit of a surprise to us. Our top team is actually our internal communications team. So every week we churn out a newsletter in Chaucer, which is called our weekly update. And it's 4 people amongst us who collaborate every week, like a hot newspaper off the press every Friday. It goes out to all company with the hottest news of that week. And yes, we're using that team to churn it out every Friday.
And Dani, this is actually a secondary role for most of you. It's not your primary job, is it?
For me, it is. So I'm the only one in my corporate comms team. The other people, so like Sarah, who's actually into knowledge management, but she supports. And then I have 2 other people who are actually in their day job consultants who work on client side and on projects. So they are doing that in their spare time. So it's not like we can have a editorial meeting where we can all get together and churn it out. We have to make use of the time as and when we have it.
So you're working asynchronously pretty much the whole time?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And can you just walk us through, how do you do that in a Teams channel? I know you guys are using channel rather than chat. Can you just explain to us, because this is really the best practice of how to use Teams. Walk us through how it looks day to day for you, please.
Yeah, so Friday, 5 p.m. is our deadline, actually 3 p.m. if we can make it. And from then we work backwards. So on a Wednesday, we call out to the entire company to ask them what news they have for us. One of us, so we are 4 people, one of us then creates a Word document, which is basically the blueprint or the rough draft. And that's stored in Teams. That person shares it then in a post in that channel, linking that file through. So it's easily accessible for everybody, saying, here's the new draft for this week. And everybody just starts dumping their information in there. Whoever then has time goes in and does a little bit of editing or rereading. We're then using comments within that Word document, as well as comments under that thread in that channel to really understand what's going on, who has somebody is missing something, or if I hear something from somebody else, I'll put it in there so that everybody is up to date of what we're gathering. And that's happening from Wednesday all the way through to Friday morning. We're gathering, we're packaging it up, and then once we're happy with whatever it looks like, with the full editing, we then start to think about who has the time to transport it into the software that we're using to actually churn it out. And again, this comes down to who has the time. If I have an important meeting or workshop on a Friday, I use the channel to just add the team in. So making sure that they get the notification saying add the weekly update team. So Sarah, Alex, and Penise get their little message. Anybody able to transform the data into our software, and somebody will always pick that up. And so yeah, that's how it then works. Somebody hits then send, and at the end of it we celebrate that we got the edition out, and there's lots of love and likes and things like that happening.
That's just an absolutely amazing story, Dani. Now, Sarah, sort of from your perspective, so where do you fit in as a how does it, you sort of one of those, if you like, team members that are not on a Dani's authority control? What does it look like for you when you're participating?
Well, it's just as Dani described. So it makes it so much easier that we don't have a set meeting. We don't need a meeting as such to get together and talk through stuff. We can just do that stuff in our own time. When we've got time, then we can quickly go in. We can add in what we found. We can highlight to others and say, actually, I've got a lot of meetings today, so if you can, help take up the slack, then we do that. I mean, I guess from a trust point of view, there's a huge amount of trust between us that, if somebody says they're going to do something, they do it. And it's really nice to be able to put a comment in and say, I've seen this bit, I think it needs a bit of a rewrite. Can somebody help shape it? And somebody does. And so it's great. And I think the at mentioning the team and at mentioning individuals works really well as well, because in my position as kind of head of knowledge management, I work across a lot of teams within the organization. I have many teams, so I really rely on the notifications to kind of see what's going on and to pull my attention in. So I would say the way that we're working is probably one of my favorite teams to be in, if I'm honest.
Sarah, you mentioned just before about the trust, and Katrina asked a question earlier on about this, or just talking about the psychological safety and how mindsets need to change. How did you build up that trust? And especially during COVID lockdowns, I'm assuming that you guys haven't been face to face in a year or so. How do you build up that trust on teams?
Yeah, I mean, it's I think for me, when so I'm going to give a shout out here to people who've heard of Working Out Loud. I think that's something. So John Stepper and the Working Out Loud movement. So for me, it's the fact that something doesn't need to be perfect, and actually I can get more trust by saying, here's where I am right now, and can somebody help me make it stronger and better? So it's almost leading with this is what I need, and kind of leading with the generosity to say, I know that you might be able to help me with this, which is a kind of weird way of positioning that as generosity, but actually it is, because it's giving people the opportunity to show what they know and how they can contribute. So for me, I think that's really helped in shaping how I turn up on teams and in Yammer. Dani, I don't know if you have another perspective on that.
I think it's exactly that. So I think we led by example to say it's okay to not know things. I know comms is I breathe and live comms, but there are days where I sit down, I have no idea what I'm writing. I know sort of the content that needs to go in there, but it reads really clunky and really badly. And so I then encourage our consultants who might not have comms as their main focus, in fact, one definitely doesn't, to just look at it and say, hey, can you look at it with fresh eyes? And they come back with this beautifully crafted paragraph of short news, and then we celebrate that and we say, well, thank you, that's exactly what I wanted. Just being very overt about what we can and can't do amongst ourselves, and then to pat each other on the back. I think that's a big thing as well. Fridays are so hectic and so stressful, because it's like in any other newspaper, it needs to go out, and the fact that we all pat each other on the back and everybody does their bits and we then say thank you for it, that really helps and created that trust, I think.
And one of the other things that you were both mentioning, feeling safe and being able to, I guess, experiment and practice, test things, is part of that helped by having a smaller team? Earlier, I think there were some questions in the chat about the 3 to 8 as the best sizes. Is that helpful?
I would think so, yes, because it means, especially with comms, you can, you have 20 people look at it and you have 25 different opinions as what good looks like. So therefore, having a small team is really helpful, and these people and you get to know them really well. It also means that if you add the team in, it's not going out to 30 people and everybody goes, oh, somebody else will do it. It's very much so. If I add the weekly update team, I know 3 other people get the notification and one of them will respond, because we know each other, we got each other's back. So it's that responsibility that might get lost when it's bigger.
Yeah. Sarah, we'll just go through this quickly, but the second top team that you had at Chaucer, so at Chaucer, I think you had 3 or 4 teams in the top 200 of the 100,000 analysed, and the second top one was one for a Veganuary campaign, which was about promoting a vegan lifestyle through January. So what was interesting, I thought about this was a project team that had a start date and a finish date, and it was during the 3-month period that we analysed. So can you tell me a little bit about why a team like that's so successful? And I think a lot of people on the call might be interested how you can get a project team with a definitive timeline and still be so successful.
Yeah, I think so. With that, we have various communities who come together, and they it's very much led by our consultants wanting to do things that support our aims to improve lives. So something that they're very passionate about, and so with the Veganuary, I suppose the campaign there, they were using teams to do the work behind the scenes, and using teams to, I think they had a number of posts that they did. They organised a video session, a webinar that they recorded, and then they developed that into a very polished looking video. There was a lot of things that they were doing, and they used teams kind of behind the scenes to work on that. And then they were, when they had their posts ready, then they had their news articles ready, when they had the kind of the things that needed to go wider, that was then pushed to SharePoint and Yammer. So the team part of it was kind of the preparation and the behind the scenes work, so very similar to us in a way. And then it was going out to the rest of the company. And in fact, that team is now working on a plastic-free July campaign. So they're back at it again, and they're doing their work, and they're getting us ready to support plastic-free July for the whole of July.
Oh, I love it. Oh, sorry, Laurie, you go.
No, that's fine. I think it was just a great story. And one thing I would say that, you know, this whole trust that you were building and having each other's back was actually a common story found with a number of the leading teams. So, you know, that psychological safety was such an important thing for them. But,
there's one thing I probably also, would like to add. What the beauty of that project team was, if whenever new people would come in, it was very easy for them to get up to speed. So if somebody decided halfway through they wanted to join the Veganuary train, they could join. All the files were there, all the communications were there. And I think that made it also very easy for the team who managed it to just say, hey, come on board, you can help. Here is the platform of where you can help and what you can do. Another really great perk.
And then another positive with that, Dani, was the fact that these, again, are secondary roles. Like, this is just something that people who are passionate about these issues are doing, you know, as a secondary role to their primary work. Yeah. Sarah, just finally, can you please tell us, you mentioned about Yammer before, and we do Yammer benchmarking as well, and Chaucer the past few years has been one of the top performing Yammer networks. But the big thing is you've got Yammer, you've got Teams. Have you got some guidelines as to when to use Yammer and when to use Teams?
Yes, I do. I think there's a little bit of background noise. Okay. Yeah. So the way I explain it to people is, if you're working in teams, is because you know your team, you know exactly who's in your team, you know what you're doing, you know why you're there, you know what you need to get done. And so Teams is the right place for doing your teamwork. And then if you want to engage the rest of the company, if you want to engage a wider group of people who may want to hear about what you're doing, but, you know, not necessarily kind of get involved and do the work, but they might want to see the output of what you're talking about, then that's where Yammer comes into play. So Yammer is very much open, and as all of the communities that we have in Yammer are open, you know, public communities, open to everybody, so that you know, if you're interested in that particular area, then you can join that community and you can see posts and you can search for posts and you can add and get involved. So I what I look for when I'm going on to SWOOP for Yammer is I'll look and see, were any private communities created recently? And if they were, then I'll go and ask them and say, hey, I saw that you've created this private community. What's that about? What are you looking to achieve there? And then it might be that I suggest that maybe if it's for teamwork, that maybe a team is more appropriate rather than having the private community within Yammer. So I think trying to make that that distinction really clear and easy to people, so that Teams is for teamwork and Yammer is for engaging them much more widely.
Yeah, fantastic guidelines. Thank you for sharing that. And Sarah, you've also agreed to share your SWOOP for Teams dashboard. And the reason we wanted to show you this is Sarah's actually showing the real data from Dani and Sarah's team, which was our #1 team. And what I'm going to ask you, Kai, if you could jump in here and just go through to explain to everybody what measurements to look for when you want to find those high-performing teams. What should we really be focusing on?
Sure.
Right.
So with a bit of luck, we're really testing the technology out here. We're going to get Sarah to share her screen, and look at that, it's all coming up.
Yeah. Okay.
Yay.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, we can see it. So we've gone back to the time period around the time when we actually did the analysis. So you can see the date range says the 1st of December 2020 to 28th of February. And this is indeed the weekly. This is the #1 team. And when we look at these high performing teams, as Laurie was talking about, these they have a set of, I guess, common traits among them. If you look at the number of members here, there were 4. So I think Laurie mentioned between 3 and 8. It's really hard to have these very highly reciprocated connections once the team starts to grow. So it's 4 people. You'll see over on the right-hand side, this has been called out automatically as what's called a self-directed team. And you can see that little iconic representation there of the black circles and the lines between them. That represents it. We automatically detect this based on the interaction patterns. So the team can go in and see what style of team they are. And we can see that even one of the metrics, it says a key player dependency. It just reports on whether or not they rely on a single person, and they don't. Like this is one of those where Daniel and Sarah were saying they just all work seamlessly together. It's really like a total embedded network. And if you scroll down a little bit, you'll see the two-way relationships. You'll see that, so in the middle column there, it says two-way relationships, 100%. It's just phenomenal. That's when everyone interacts with everyone. It doesn't have to be 100% to make it like a #1 out of 100,000, but it needs to be very high. And that's the problem. In some of the chat we talked about, I think it was Katrina that was saying that, like sometimes these teams get very big. And this is where you start to see an impact on that two-way relationships, because once we have 10 or 20 or 30 or 40 or 50 people in the team, it's just really hard to get to know everyone. And the moment you don't feel you know everyone, there's no psychological safety. And then that's when we say, I'm just going to chat to Sarah about this. I'm just going to hop over and chat and do this because the other people, the other 48, I don't really know. And that's where this thing starts to sort of fall down. And I think it's one of the reasons why we're seeing so much happening in chat. It's simply because these teams grow too big, and we need to sort of, to really have these teams that really need to operate at a high level of collaborative output. You need to have high level of trust, and you really need to think about who's in the team and not inviting someone just because, Laurie, he's sort of the chief scientist, we ought to invite him in. And Laurie is very enthusiastic about invited in, and he doesn't like saying I shouldn't be here. So the team just grows and grows. So anyway, just a couple of metrics. If we scroll down just a tiny little bit more on the screen, some other things that shows you that this is just one of those high velocity teams. The response rate over on the right-hand side, like 81%, replies to a post. Just imagine what it feels like. You go and you post, bang, you get a reply. In this case, 71% of those comes within an hour. Boom, If we worked across multiple time zones, of course, you'd set your expectations accordingly. So this is a really nice way for you to have a conversation with your team and say, well, you can use this data to agree team protocols. How are we supposed to be working together? You know, and like, can we ensure that we don't just invite people in? Do we have sort of an agreement that when someone posts something, we're using the @mention the team, and then we respond? And I think the problem, once the team grows, then everyone is thinking that someone else will respond. But what Dani and Sarah has got, they've got this real high trust team. And you know, when you're calling someone out, we need help, and boom, you get the answer straight away. So really good. And the last two things I'll talk about is the mention and the curiosity index. This good practice of mentioning. So we calculate that how often a team is using the mentioning feature. So you can see here that 26% of posts have a mention in them, and we actually have some. There's a little goal target in there, and Sarah, if you could just hover over that goal. We actually put that in a global benchmarking of what we think you should be able to achieve. And we're not saying it's right, and it's not like for everywhere, but it's, you know, it's like the Fitbit 10,000 steps per day. You know, if you don't know anything else, then try to aim for that, unless you have an agreement that you just on this all the time, you don't have to mention each other. But, you know, Sarah and Dani, they're killing it here, you know, with 26%. The curiosity index on the far left reports on how often we ask questions. And you know, in teams with high level of trust, we're not afraid of asking questions. You know, in teams with low level of trust, we just do lots of updates, but we don't ask questions, because questions is a sign of weakness. So, you know, again here, the global sort of average, we can see those really high performing teams takes us up in the 20%. And again, you can see why Dani and Sarah's the weekly update made it to #1. You're just nailing it on all metrics. So if you ever want a case study and you know, someone to point to and say that's the kind of working style we want to replicate, this is the team to have a look at. So thank you so much, Dani and Sarah, for sharing these numbers with us. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, Dani and Sarah, thank you so much. And everyone, please keep your questions, or you can ask them in the chat now, but we'll have some time to be able to ask.